Welcome to Post Colonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I'll briefly talk about meritocracy as a concept, practice, and a term, how it gets appropriated by the conservative economists or people who believe in conservatism, and what are its dark sides. Okay, so on the surface, the term meritocracy basically means the organization of a society or an economy or a polity based on merit, which means that no one gets a place in the social hierarchy or political hierarchy based on their wealth or their social class, but that individuals, because of their talent, because of their hard work, and because of their constant effort, rise up to the top level of any given society. So, on the surface, it looks like a really plausible and laudable idea that society should be organized on the basis of talent. Now, the term or the concept in one way or the other has been existent for the longest time. It was part of the system in the Greek city-states, also in early European and other societies. But the term itself was coined, meritocracy, by Michael Dunlop Young in 1958 in a satirical essay that he later published as a book, which was called The Rise of the Meritocracy. Now, the book itself was kind of a satire, and it gives the idea of a meritocratic utopia, but then it is later taken up as a serious term by people who want to basically promote this idea that we don't want to base our decisions on people's wants. We don't want to base our decisions on what some group or some individual might need, but let us create a society in which those who are better intellectually, in terms of their skills, in terms of their hard work, rise automatically to the top. And you hear these slogans in every political situation where people believe we want to establish merit. And of course, as that term, it becomes a powerful term, because who would argue against it, right? And but there are, of course, certain dark sides to this whole idea of merit. One of the most important things is, if you want to build a society on merit and talent, right, alone, then it absolutely always gets connected to education, right? Because education is the ideological mode through which we learn the skills, social and technical. So most meritocracies then are based in education. What kind of expertise you have, what kind of education you have, what is the gradation of education you have. And the problem arises there, because people assume that access to good education is universal. But if there are already inequalities in access to education and educational system based on your social class or your region or where you live, chances are, even if you create a meritocracy, right, you will have certain people who will be privileged, who will have an advantage over the others. So that's one big problem of structuring a meritocracy based on educational excellence and assuming that everyone has same access to education and everyone has same access to getting an education and rising up. Keep that in mind. So please also keep in mind that meritocracy as a system of selecting civil servants and bureaucrats actually comes from the East. Okay, China, the Han Dynasty, had an elaborate system of tests and exams through which the bureaucrats were trained, the civil servants were trained, they had to take exams and then appointed on merit to different positions. Similarly, if you look at the Abbasid Empire, the way the judges and justices and everyone else was appointed was based on their expertise, based on their knowledge. You couldn't become a qadi or a judge simply because you were connected to someone. You had to know the Islamic jurisprudence and the law to get there. So the instances of that kind of meritocracy were always there, and invariably always it is connected to education or expertise, and then your ability to perform well on a test or grade well in some kind of a testing system which can separate, the better performers from the others. So that core concept still carries on in the 21st century. So in our own times, the American philosopher Michael Sandel has probably the most instructive book on meritocracy. And the book is entitled The Tyranny of Merit, What's Become of the Common Good. And of course, he's using this example of how the merit-based system itself, of course, has a tiered approach. Right? Some people are born, as you proverbially say, on the third base, but also that if you focus so much on merit and make it into this panacea for all decisions of quality and access to the upper echelons of a society, you do it at the cost of social good. What does that mean? So think of it this way. If you create a society in which people assume that people who are at their higher positions have earned it, and they are somehow the ones who are successful and they have made it, then you automatically divide the society into those who are successful and hence deserving of all the positions that they have, and then those who are losers, right? Furthermore, what in economic theory then, instead of caring for the so-called losers, the poor, right, the infirm and all, what you then consider is that they are spending resources on them is a waste of time, is a waste of resources because they have already failed. What that system assumes is that an equal opportunity was given to everyone, and those who took that opportunity and worked hard succeeded, and those who didn't, they failed. So if you look at neoliberal economics, post-Reagan, post-Margaret Thatcher, so the emphasis is always on merit, right? And on investing your resources on those who are already doing a lot of work, who are successful, but it also creates a dark side to it. Those are the people who are left outside the promise of that merit. How does that happen? So let's say education, if that is the panacea for upward mobility, for it to be effective in society, right? Access to education everywhere across the board in any given nation should be universal, should be free, right? Then anything that holds people back, right? If you live in a poor, crime-ridden neighborhood, chances of you not doing as well as someone who lives in a suburban neighborhood and goes to an open school your chances are already diminishing. So what that means is that there are structural, infrastructural, and social inequalities already in place. And for someone from a very poor neighborhood or a crime-ridden neighborhood, not necessarily poor, to make it through the educational system is a monumental task, and those inequalities, of course, multiply. So in a way, then the meritocracy is not necessarily the individual doing his or her best, but also the infrastructure within which the individual exists and the possibilities that exist within it. So if you have an unequal social system already, then the idea of merit is basically, yes, on the surface it is based in merit, but then certain people are already in an advantageous position. And those advantages multiply. Now, in order to clearly understand, of course, this inbuilt inequalities of the so-called conservative economy and system based in merit, I highly recommend Thomas Piketty's book. I mean, with all the data available to him, he has already convincingly argued that super wealth has already become patrimonial. You cannot become super wealthy simply through working as a daily wage worker, or it doesn't matter how hard you work. Beyond that, people even though we call these societies of merit, people who are born in a privileged system, upper middle class family with a stable family, they can be mediocre but still be successful because infrastructurally they have more resources at hand. Similarly, people who come from the poor neighborhoods or minoritized groups or racially oppressed groups, they have to be exceptional to meet that meritorious requirement and to meet the merit. So all those inequalities form the darker side of this so-called society of merit, and we need to keep that in mind. But most importantly, when a society starts thinking that they are a merit and they've built an entire infrastructure on merit, it then creates these two binaries, right? Of those who made it, they automatically met the merit and worked hard and hence are successful. And as a result, those who didn't make it, maybe, infrastructurally they couldn't, maybe they didn't have enough resources, maybe they lived in a neighborhood that didn't have enough resources, but those are considered wasted bodies, as Zygmunt Bauman would say, or are considered those who have failed, and then policies are not geared towards caring and helping those who are poor and bringing them up, but rather claiming that we have a meritocracy and we need to support those who are already doing their share of work. So these are some of the aspects of thinking of a society in terms of merit. Now, I'm not saying there is anything wrong with it. I mean, every society needs a system of, guiding people through the process, but doing it in a way where you become totally obsessed on those who succeed and consider that those who didn't make within the system are a failure is a terrible way of creating a society. Now, that is what I would like to suggest we all ought to think about, is that if we buy into this fiction of society, what is the cost of it to us as humans? Right? And what kind of a mindset does it create in those who absolutely believe in it? Does it make them less compassionate, less generous, more judgmental? If it does that, right, then there is something wrong with this entire argument of a merit-based society. So these are some of my thoughts. I will post the links to the books I mentioned in the description. Please do read them. And as always, these talks or these videos are not all exhaustive. I cannot cover everything. I just barely touch upon the subject. The hope always is that you'll go and read and explore and hence develop your knowledge further. By the way, this video was requested by one of the subscribers, and I am hopeful that this meets your requirements. If it doesn't, I apologize. Thank you so much. And as always, I will see you next time, and until then, peace and love.